With the long-awaited release of version 1.3, I expect quite a few players have already fallen to Yanagi's banner, along with others waiting on our first male S-rank character to drop in the second half being lighter. However, it is that time once again where we look at the characters drip marketed for the next version. Though as of now, only one character has been drip marketed for version 1.4 being Harumasa. And the fact it's been quite a few days since his reveal with no sight of the second character, it does seem slightly weird and it could be one of many reasons that would explain this. But as for who exactly the second character to be revealed is, the only possible new character would be none other than Miyabi, and considering many sources claim that Miyabi will definitely be dropping, I'd like to believe that will be the case, and so with that, I'll be going over some kit speculations for both 1.4 characters, team synergies to possibly look forward to, and ultimately, who should you prioritize from both version 1.3 and 1.4. Just before we jump into it, as always, would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel for more ZenlessZoneZero content and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Kicking it off with the first character dropping in 1.4 being Harumasa, which has been confirmed to be our first S-rank electric type attacker. Now attack characters surprisingly haven't been seen since the beginning of the game, whereas anomaly DPS characters have been releasing every version since 1.0, which I initially expected to be the other way around, given anomaly characters are pretty much the dot characters of Zenless. With that being said, anomaly DPS characters do currently dominate the meta as they do perform significantly better than attackers. So taking that into consideration, it would be fair to expect Harumasa to be the one to restore the attacker archetype name and will be our best attacker in the game. Which of course may allow him to possibly rival our best anomaly characters in the amount of ridiculous DPS they are capable of dealing. So with that, Harumasa should be able to deal a ton of burst damage with his ultimate, given that is where majority of damage stems from with attackers, and considering that disorder isn't so easily triggered from attackers, to make up for it, Harumasa's ultimate should be able to deal an absurd amount of DPS and a lot more in comparison to characters such as Jiyan and Ellen. Now more specifically, Harumasa will likely have the ability to switch between two different stances just like Yanagi, since we have been able to see him switch between a bow and two daggers in combat. So Harumasa will be capable of dealing range damage and melee damage, which of course will provide players with more comfort when taking on difficult content. Additionally, just as Yanagi is able to obtain multiple self buffs from her stances, Harumasa may possibly be able to also receive buffs, and since he is a crit character, I would definitely assume at least one of the stances to provide a boost in either crit rate or crit damage, which will definitely make building Harumasa a lot easier. Now lastly, due to the existence of the Chaos Jazz disc drive set, which is tailor-made for fire and electric off-field damage dealers, along with the fact that there isn't an electric off-field damage dealer currently in our roster, as much as the 2-piece effect wouldn't benefit Harumasa as it would for an anomaly character, the 4-piece effect increasing electric damage and damage when off-field may suggest that Harumasa could be our electric off-field damage dealer. Now that does seem a bit far-fetched since the set would be ideal for an anomaly off-field DPS. But since Yanagi isn't an off-field damage dealer and the Chaos Jazz set is in fact a best in slot 4-piece set, it means characters can get by without having to fully utilize the effect of a disc drive set. So with that, Harumasa might be able to deal damage off-field along with dealing explosive damage when on-field. Now as for Harumasa's team synergies, given he is an electric attacker, there will be a few teams to definitely consider, such as the Mono Electric team consisting of Harumasa as the main DPS, Changli as the stun character, and Rina as the support. With Changli, Harumasa will be able to deal a ton more burst damage as she does increase the stun damage multiplier by a massive 80%. Also, since Changli's second core passive is activated by either attackers or characters from the same faction, Harumasa being an attacker will be able to activate Changli's core passive, allowing them to synergize pretty well together. With Rina, she will be able to provide quite a few buffs to the team, such as a pen ratio increase up to 30%, increases the duration of shock on enemies by 3 seconds, and increases all members' electric damage by 10%. So these would be quite valuable buffs for both Changli and Harumasa. But especially considering that Rina takes up hardly any field time, it does make her even more valuable as a support, as you would have more field time with Harumasa and Changli. So the Mono Electric team will definitely be a great team to consider for Harumasa, providing him with lots of buffs and ample field time. Alternatively, there is Harumasa with Lighter and Caesar being another viable team variation. Considering that Laita also shares the same core passive requirement as Changli, being that an attacker or a character of the same faction will be able to activate it, Harumasa will definitely then be an option to pair alongside Laita in order to activate his core passive. However, the only issue is that Laita does specialize in buffing ice and fire damage for allies, which Harumasa deals neither. So Laita would just be more of a standard stun character for Harumasa, being able to stun enemies extremely quick and will be capable of dealing considerable damage. Though it is still a bit early to tell whether Laita will be able to buff Harumasa's damage some other way through his kit. So we will need to wait and see whether that will be possible, but as of now, Laita will still be a decent option. That being said, the real value does lie with Caesar, given she is the best support character in the game and is able to offer a ton of utility through her kit. Also, just like Rina, she does take up hardly any field time, so Harumasa will be granted ample time on the field. Now lastly, this next team variation does depend on whether Harumasa will be capable of dealing damage off field, as then Harumasa, Yanagi and Rina will be able to synergize pretty well together. Yanagi is able to play within mono-electric teams but does require a lot of field time. So if Harumasa doesn't require that much time and is able to deal damage off field, it would allow him to be perfect with Yanagi, and so you would have two insane damage dealers from section 6 along with Rina buffing their damage. So with that, Harumasa does have quite a few team variations to choose from, but the closer we do get to his release, we will have more info on his kit to see exactly who will be his best allies. Now moving on to the one and only Miyabi, which along with multiple sources claiming for her to drop in 1.4, the fact that she's an ice type anomaly character has also been stated, which is really to no surprise since there is already an ice type limited attacker being Ellen. So with that, it will leave Miyabi with the only choice of being an anomaly DPS. Otherwise, she would likely power creep the hell out of Ellen. So Miyabi, being our first ice type anomaly DPS in the game, definitely does have a ton of potential. Even though the damage dealt from triggering Shatter technically deals the least out of the other anomalies, it just means Miyabi's kit is going to be insanely stacked in order to make up for it. However, along with triggering Shatter, Frostbite is applied on enemies and it does increase the crit damage taken by the target. So with that in mind, it would be fair to assume Miyabi's kit might share a few similarities with Jane's kit. More specifically, the inclusion of there being a chance to crit when triggering the anomaly, which is certainly going to lead to a ton of damage being dealt, and since it is Miyabi, I would expect it to likely be the hardest hitting damage dealer in the game. Now, not to mention, the main ability of ice type characters is that they are able to freeze enemies and incapacitate them. So considering that Miyabi is an anomaly DPS, she will be capable of freezing enemies very often and then proceeding to deal nuclear damage on top. In terms of Miyabi's playstyle, I really can't see her playing as anything else other than a main DPS similar to Yanagi. However, depending on her anomaly build-up rate, Miyabi might be capable of playing as both main DPS and a dual DPS. Since if Miyabi does have a rapid anomaly build-up rate, she can be utilized more as a quickswap DPS and will then be able to play with other DPS characters that do require a lot of field time, which would of course be amazing for her team flexibility. Though regardless of exactly how Miyabi's kit will be, it is fair to believe that Miyabi will be arguably the best DPS character in the game, along with having some of the best looking animations. Now, as for Miyabi's team synergies, since she is an ice type anomaly DPS character, regardless of the specifics of her kit, I do believe Miyabi, Laita and Bernice will be either the best or one of the best teams for Miyabi, considering that Laita will be able to shred ice and fire resistance on enemies, along with his second core passive straight up increasing ice and fire damage for allies. So Laita will simply allow for both Miyabi and Bernice to deal significantly more damage. Additionally, Laita is able to stun enemies for longer than usual, which is going to extend the burst window for his allies. Then with Bernice being a fire type anomaly DPS that specializes in dealing damage off field, she will essentially allow for disorder to be triggered efficiently and for Miyabi to have a ton of field time. So as expensive as this team is, it is certainly a powerful team with lots of synergy between all three characters. Alternatively, and again it does depend just like with Harumasa, but if Miyabi can play as a quickswap DPS due to triggering freeze insanely quick, then Miyabi will be able to play alongside Yanagi and Caesar. Considering that Yanagi will be able to increase the amount of disorder damage dealt from the team and procs her own polarity disorders, along with Caesar simply providing a ton of buffs and a tanky shield. So this will be another team able to deal enormous amounts of damage. But again, it does depend on if Miyabi does trigger freeze quick enough to provide Yanagi with slightly more field time, and if so, then this might end up being her best team. Lastly, the Mono Ice team would definitely be a viable team to run, consisting of Miyabi, Lycan, and Sokaku. Essentially, Lycan and Sokaku will be mega buffing Miyabi to enable her to deal a ton more damage, consisting of Lycan's ability to decrease ice resistance on enemies by 25% and increase the stun damage multiplier by 35%, along with Sokaku being able to provide 1000 flat attack and increase ice damage for the entire team by 20%. So this will definitely be a great team capable of perma-freezing enemies and dealing lots of damage. So Miyabi does have quite a few options with her team comps, but again, we will need to wait till we have more info on her kit to see exactly who will be the best team for Miyabi. So now with everything considered, between 1.3 and 1.4 it is certainly going to be difficult, since I have mentioned all 4 characters being synergistic with each other, meaning they all do hold a ton of individual value. However, the character that provides the most value on paper, and as from what we can currently tell, Lighter will hold the most, given he is the only character in the bunch that isn't a DPS, which automatically allows him to hold more value and longevity. But given that Miyabi is likely going to transcend every other DPS character, there is a ton of value in that as well. So as much as Lighter may hold more value as of now, I would still highly suggest to have enough saved up for Miyabi. With Yanagi, the ability to increase disorder damage from the team along with dealing her own special type of disorder damage does provide her with quite a bit of longevity too, as she will be essential for disorder teams moving forward. As for Harumasa, he will likely be the best attacker in the game and will have a stacked kit allowing him to deal a ton of damage. But if that's all he is capable of, then just like with our current attack characters, he really wouldn't be that valuable in the long run, which does place more of a need on him having the ability to deal damage off field. However, as always, it does depend on your account and preference, since if you favor playing with anomaly characters that can deal insane amounts of damage, Yanagi and Miyabi will be the ones to prioritize. If your account is lacking stun/support characters and you do main ice or fire DPS characters, Lighter will then be the one to prioritize. Or lastly, if you just favor DPS characters that are more traditional and scale off crit, then Harumasa will be the one to aim for. So essentially, whichever character that seems more ideal for your account is exactly what you will need to prioritize. But regardless of your decision, they all do hold a ton of value. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel for more ZenlessZoneZero content, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Also drop a comment down below on who exactly will you be pulling for between 1.3 and 1.4. And yeah, hope to catch you guys later.